Everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Noah Talks About Everything. Today, I'm going to talk about my thoughts about the 2020 election and what's currently going on. So, I've been following the election pretty dang closely, and I've been following a lot of the candidates. My two favorite candidates. Well, one thing is, I wish personally that there would be more options on the Republican side of things, that we wouldn't just have. I know that's just the way it goes. The incumbent president always gets to run sort of unparalleled or what's the word? Well, he doesn't have to have any competition. He just gets to run again and run against the Democratic competition or the independent. But we all know it's two parties, and um, so the only thing really interesting to follow, as far as I was concerned, or as far as I'm concerned, is and was all of the Democratic candidates. Now, by and large, I thought almost all of the Democratic candidates were horrible candidates. I think, who knows? Maybe some of them actually were good candidates, but the way that the debates and the way the process works, it brings out the worst in everybody. That's a possibility too. I think about that because I think some of these people aren't as crazy as they seem to be in front of the main stage cameras. I've watched more long form dialogues from a number of different Democratic candidates, and when they weren't under the spotlight of the mainstream debates and audiences, then that kind of, in those situations where you're given several minutes to try to articulate yourself and represent yourself to the general public, uh, well, it seems like maybe that pressure is not conducive at all, to put it mildly, to coherent discussion. And so I think maybe we get to see a lot of the worst qualities. And not only that, I think it might inspire um, people, for the sake of trying to come out on top. And maybe it inspires candidates to do things or say things that violate their own codes of ethics, or that they would never say in any other situation. That doesn't excuse it, but I think maybe it's in some ways. Well, I think certainly I can say it's a rigged game. I think that's pretty clear at this point. It's not a fair system. The debates, the different they the hosts of the debates, they pander to different candidates. They clearly have their favorite candidates. I think certainly questions are worked out ahead of time. Um, People know the questions that they're going to be receiving, and they've already worked out their answers. But I think one thing that has become pretty clear with this election, and maybe it will change, and I think it's been moving in that direction, but we've seen it in a way that maybe we haven't seen before, which is it's basically theater. It's candidates want to have the big moments. They want to have the moments with the audience, swelling behind them, and maybe that has a lot to do with their lack of respect for the general public to make sound decisions based on logic, and that most people, and that's been my experience as well as a musician. My experience is that most people are followers. They will look at what's going on around them and they'll just sort of follow suit. There aren't very many people that actually take the initiative to be the first to do something or first to say something. So if you're watching a TV program and you're already conditioned to side with the liberal media side of things, and you're watching a debate and one of the candidates has this big moment and the audience reacts, and you can tell it's not that hard to see who the audience is cheering for more than other people, or what the biggest moments are in the debate in terms of the feedback from the audience. And so then you might think that this candidate's the best candidate, even though they're really just pandering to the audience, trying to say things that can elicit an emotional response. And so I think that's what a lot of the debate becomes. But my favorite Democratic candidates were, well, my first one was Andrew Yang, and my second would have been Tulsi Gabbard. I never really liked Tulsi Gabbard. I think she strikes me as fake. I just always thought that the way she was interacting with people, a lot of people said that she's a very strong voice, a voice that needs to be heard. But to me, it didn't really seem ever that she was being genuine. I thought she very clearly had motivations that she wasn't being honest about. Um, Whereas with Andrew Yang, I don't think that was the case at all. He was gimmicky for sure, but I think he just sort of played into that. That most that's the direction of things in general is to become kind of gimmicky because when you're given a very short frame of time to get yourself across, you can't. So why do it? It's so instead he played the gimmicks. But I think if you actually looked into deeper who he was and the perspective he was coming from, he's actually a very thoughtful and compassionate person. I believe more so than any of the other Democratic candidates. And I don't think he had any effort to be fake to get there. Gimmicky, yes, but fake, no. And I do think, though, when working with somebody like him, who I think was coming from, I saw him say that the reason he got into the race was because he didn't see much of a future for his children. That the future that he could see based on the status quo, was a very scary future for his children. And this was bringing him to tears when he said it. Sometimes I think people fake cry. I don't think that's what he was doing. I think he genuinely is in a certain state of desperation with what he sees for his future for his kids. And I think that inspired his run. However, that does not guarantee that he's going to be a good candidate, for years to come. And the question is, okay, so he can handle running a business, he can handle running a successful business, apparently, and stay true to his ethics for the most part. Who knows what the actual history of what he's done in companies is. But when you're now being charged with running a country and bringing everybody together and trying to make the good decisions and inspire the best out of everyone as the leader of an entire country, well, how do you handle that? Do you stay when you're running I'll say a small company because it's small compared to the entire United States. When you're running a small company, are those pressures and the threats to you anywhere comparable to what you are put under when you take over the country? And I don't think that I think the answer to that is obvious, and it's no. And I definitely, as the race progressed and he started to get more and more popularity, I started to see some bad tendencies, at least to me, in his management of his own emotions. I think I can speak to this as a musician. When I started to get popularity early on in my career, which I haven't had some kind of very popular success, but even in my small local way, when I started to get popularity in my career, it was difficult for me to manage. And I don't know that I managed it that well. I didn't understand it, I don't think. And the point is, when you start to get that popularity sort of equals power, it, because you gain the ability to move people. And you can also, it's very easy to let it go to your head. You can start to think, yeah, I'm amazing. This is why everybody likes me, because it's me. And you can start to become very arrogant and think that all of the different decisions have too much confidence in your own thinking. And then you start to become more like a tyrant. So I don't think that you can just go based on when you see that somebody's coming from a genuine place, that you can just outright trust they're the best choice to be a leader. So, but that said, Andrew Yang was the one. Even though I'm not a big proponent of the universal basic income, and he definitely had different perspectives from what I did, but I thought he spoke eloquently about them when you dove into his long form conversation. I think he spoke eloquently in a way that many of the followers of, let's say, Bernie Sanders or Joe Biden or Elizabeth Warren if they had seen some of the ways that he spoke about women, for example, and women's issues, I think many people would have been swayed to support Andrew Yang. I think he spoke eloquently in a way that bridges gaps on women's issues that nobody else was coming close to. And I think maybe that was a big mistake of his campaign is they should have shown more footage of him speaking about women's issues. Um, so um, I come from more of a conservative background, so that too I think is a very important thing to note, that I think he appealed to people on both sides, which was pretty rare, and especially for somebody who he was definitely Democrat. He was definitely liberal in his perspectives. So I thought that was interesting. He was probably the most interesting candidate to me, and probably a shame that he didn't get the attention that he deserved. And I think it was a mistake on the part of the Democrats. So now we're here with the remaining candidates being Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. And a lot of people like Bernie Sanders. From what I've just watched today, it looks like Bernie Sanders is probably not going to win the nomination, but we've got to hold out to this next debate before he would probably make any kind of decision on that. And maybe he won't. Maybe he'll push to the end, but it's looking like, based on the amount of delegates that everybody has, that Joe Biden's going to be the guy. And I don't know what to say. To me, I think it's already over. If maybe Bernie has a shot, if he were to win the nomination, that maybe he has a shot to actually beat Trump. And the only way that I see that is that I think people can start to become, I think people can start to go crazy. Like Trump is I don't know, personally, I don't know that Trump has done that bad of a job in terms of his actual policies and his accomplishments. In terms of his rhetoric, I think it's probably been a terrible thing for our country. I think I personally can put a lot of blame, and I would agree with people that put a lot of blame on liberal media and um, how unfairly they have treated Republicans in general and Trump, and the lies that they've spread about him. And I know that's like, when you say that, people are going to assume that I'm like some kind of hardcore Republican and just hate liberal media or something, but I don't. Um, they've genuinely made up lies, and if you don't see that, well, you're the one being ignorant. And I also am not really a fan of a lot of right wing media, because I think they both medias are playing the same game. You can look at a headline that covers a certain topic, and you look at it in left wing media and you look at it in right wing media, and just from the, like, if you go on YouTube, just from the featured image that they choose to represent it and the title, it looks like they're obviously talking about the same story, but two completely different perspectives. And you always know that you're going to get this perspective here and this perspective here. You always know what angle you're going to get. So then that's not news. It's like, you know what it is before you even watch the video. So what is that? It's obviously biased and it's manipulative. That's the what's really behind it. I think is it's just propaganda. It's just there to help. What do they say? It's like it's fodder to feed the fire. It's red meat. Yeah, that's what they call it. It's throwing red meat to the base, right? That's what I think it is on both sides. I personally think that the Democratic side has gone farther than the right side, but maybe that warrants more looking. But that's just been my impression. But yeah, I think at this point, with Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders being the only candidates that are left, Bernie might have a chance, if he gets the nomination, to beat Trump, just because I think the progression is to get crazier and crazier. When Trump first sort of appeared as a candidate, I think most of the people on the right thought he was a ridiculous candidate. And it wasn't until he started winning the nomination and then became president, and now people actually have a respect for what he's done as president. Because at least one thing that you can say about Trump, which is what I was talking about Andrew Yang, at least one thing you can say about President Trump is that he hasn't changed. He's stayed himself. When he's become the number one leader of the country, he has stayed pretty true to himself. Now, whether or not you like him, or whether or not you like that he has stayed true to himself, um, I think he has trended. He has become probably more arrogant as time goes on. But by and large, he has not wavered, and he has not become. I mean, he was already an arrogant person, so he stayed pretty true to himself, and it doesn't, to my eye, it doesn't seem like he has really changed much as a result of the position. Um, so that's one thing about him. But Bernie, like I said, I think Bernie has a chance because it's going to get, as things keep going forward, they seem to be getting crazier and crazier. Trump was a wild card candidate. Everybody thought he was ridiculous for the most part. And then now it's kind of like anything is, we just start reaching wilder. We want some kind of solution. We want somebody that we can believe in, and we want a great leader. And it looks like you can't find them in the status quo, and we've been going with the status quo for so long. I think people want to give up on the status quo, so now we're pushing out to the extremes, and I think Bernie is a bit of an extreme. Of course, people that follow Bernie would never say he's an extremist, and I think there are probably many people that are more extreme than Bernie, but he's certainly more to the extreme than most of the other candidates that we see. And for that reason, I think that there are people that it would sort of be the pendulum swing of Trump, that we went with the extreme in whatever direction we think that was an extreme. Although I think he's kind of a one-off candidate, and now maybe the pendulum will swing back, and people think there's enough bad about what Trump has done. Look at the dialogue and what we've had to endure as a group of people, and the division that we see, whether you want to say that that's anybody's fault in particular, it's happened under the Trump administration. So maybe even just in the hope that even if you blame liberal media largely, I personally can see reason why we just say, you know what, okay, let's just do something to appease the liberal side of things. We'll get rid of Trump because we just can't keep going this way as a country of hating like this, of just hating. And so that's why I think Bernie could have a shot. But I think if Joe Biden wins the nomination, I think it's basically over. I don't think he stands a chance to beat Trump, and I don't think Bernie will likely beat Trump either. So in my opinion, I think it's already basically over. Who knows? Bernie might be an interesting one to debate Trump on. I don't think anything important will be said. It's more just about how ridiculous can one person make the other person look, which is a very depressing way to have a national election of 300 some million people. But anyway, that's basically where I am with it. I honestly think it would probably be better for the country to not have another 4 years of Trump, even though as far as policy goes and his staying true to himself, I think he's not done a bad job. But just the rhetoric that the conversation that he has helped to usher in, I think is very destructive, and I think we would be better to not have another 4 years of that. So there's my perspective on what's going on right now. Unfortunately, it looks like the options that we're going to have again for this election, the 2020 election has delivered another sort of garbage list of options. So then again, maybe I can end with this. I think I heard somebody say that, I think maybe it was Jon Stewart, that the reason we're seeing horrible candidates that we have to choose from in the national election is because that's the best we've got. And I think that's an interesting point of view, and I would be inclined to not believe that. There must be better options. But on the other hand, maybe there really isn't. Maybe there are plenty of people that we would say are good people, but do they have the courage and conviction and commitment to be able to take on that role of leadership and all of the danger in which that brings to you and your family, and stay committed to principle and value? And are they, do we, maybe that is the best that we have. And if you look around your local communities, do you really see people that are any better than these candidates? You might say yes, but if you actually put these people into position of leadership, I've seen in the local communities, I've seen in the small sort of frameworks of power that I witness within local communities, there's corruption there as well. And so I don't know, it's on a small scale, so maybe nobody really cares that much about it. The consequences aren't very big, but there's definitely corruption all over the place, not just in national government. And so maybe I think this, I can end with this. I personally believe it doesn't really matter what your system of government is. The most important thing is each individual's commitment to principle and ethical living. If each person holds themselves to the highest standard they can hold themselves to, then we'll be in a great position. But I mean, then we'd be living in as much of a paradise as you could imagine, or as would be possible. Um, I think ultimately everything boils down to the individual. Systems are important, but doesn't matter how good of a system you come up with, how brilliant of a system you come up with. There is no system that can replace or completely prevent the consequences of the corruption of individuals or the downfall of individuals. Each person gets to make their decision how they want to conduct their life. And so the more that every person can be inspired to be good and to live for the good of themselves and the good of others, then that's how we're going to be in the best position we can be in. And there's not a system that's going to be a cure. Socialism isn't, capitalism isn't. We can see there are problems everywhere, but the problems stem from immoral motivations. Immoral motivations and the failure of the individual. That's where the problems stem from. And so, at least that's my perspective. Thanks for tuning in to another Noah Talks About Everything. If you want to get a kite surfing lesson or hire me to do music, get in touch, and have a good day. Peace.